to the Right to Reason podcast. I am your host, Robert Stanley. Let me ask you something. Can something come from nothing? Today we'll be debating logic with retired Marine and Christian apologist, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Peeler. He thinks he has an answer to that question. Let's get started.
Right to Reason podcast.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by Phil Calderone, My Humble Assault, Enema Man, Larry Wilson, Gregoria, and Bernard Lamberell. If you want to support the broadcast, you could do so at patreon.com/right. Contributors to this episode are Jason Como from aloststateofmind.com and me, Dave Blair. You can get a free song of mine at davefreesong.com/free music. If you believe in the message of the right to reason but can't volunteer or contribute financially, you can still help by sharing it with your friends, giving it a rating on iTunes, subscribing to it on YouTube, following it on Twitter at Right to Reason 1, and following the Right to Reason page on Facebook. You can also write into the show and have your ideas read on air by clicking our contact link at therighttoreason.com. Thank you to our community of listeners for supporting your right to reason.
And we are here with former Marine and Christian apologist, Thomas Peeler. Mr. Peeler, I'm so happy to be talking to you today, sir.
Rob, just a second. There's no such thing as a former Marine, okay?
Oh.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. I'm sorry.
No, appropriate correction.
Retired and recovering.
So, once a Marine, always a Marine. I met a Marine. I'm sure I've met more than one, but I got to be friends with one. And the guy, part of the story is kind of funny, and part of it's kind of sad, because the guy, he did have PTSD. Yeah. He had seen a lot of tough stuff, and it broke my heart seeing a friend of mine, you'd see a switch in his eyes, where you'd just be talking about regular stuff, and I don't know what thing I would say that would trigger something else, but he would become very upset very quickly. And it wasn't like he was mad at me. I could just see anger, but his eyes were sad. It wasn't like his eyes were angry. His posturing, his shoulders were angry. Yeah. His eyes were hurt. He was just a great guy, and he was going through his own personal hell even after what had happened. But there is one story. I hate to start on such a low note. I'm sorry, but there was this time that he and I we both tried to do a lot of machismo stuff. Well, you can outdo me with this, I can outdo you with that, and that kind of thing. I had just joined a gym, and I was doing a lot of push-ups, pull-ups, and bench presses and stuff. So I felt very confident about my shoulders and my chest. I was in the zone. You know what I mean? Sure. And I
used to.
So I challenged him to a push-up contest, right? And so I start doing these push-ups, and I'm just focusing on the ground in front of me, getting closer and farther away every time I go up and down, And I hear him just, whoo, 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 next to me, and I'm killing it, because I'm counting them off while I'm going. 1, 2, 3, 4. And by the time we got to 10, I'm way ahead of this guy. I am destroying one of your fellow Marines, and I'm feeling good about it, brother. And all of a sudden, I look over at him. He's doing, I guess it would be 2 for my everyone. Whenever he's counting 1, he's going up, down, up, 1, up, down, up, 4. And so he's doing double me. Right. By the time we got to, in the mid-20s or so, I realized I can't really concentrate on the math right this second because I'm trying to do push-ups, but this guy's way ahead of me, even though I was feeling pretty cocky about my performance. I was just like, all right, I'm done. I just walked away. I didn't even shake hands. I felt so embarrassed, but he killed me, man. So that let me know, don't challenge a Marine to push-ups. How long you been out, man?
I retired in 1999, so almost 20 years.
All right, so 2 years after that, I go to Bible study. That's the same year that 9/11 happened. That's the same year that I started questioning a lot of stuff.
Did you go to seminary?
Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina, 2001. I didn't last. I didn't make it. But it was a very strict environment. It wasn't for me. And the questions that I had in my head ended up.
Is that like a Southern Baptist thing, or?
It's Independent Baptist.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know anything about any of the denominations and stuff, so.
So you're like What, like one of these modern kind of guys that does a lot of?
No. I just go to our church is just a Bible church. Teaches the Bible, and that we're not affiliated with any denomination. I've never been like a Baptist or a Methodist or a Presbyterian.
You got drums?
No.
All right. So you're still pretty conservative in the church.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. You don't have a woman preacher.
No.
Your song director isn't a black guy that slips in a little hip hop now and again. Nothing like that.
He's a young Hispanic kid.
All right. Well, close enough. We're good.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that's cool, man. So, okay, a lot of that from that time led me to become the atheist that I am today. Mm-hmm. And I feel like life's gotten better since I dropped this backpack. It felt like a backpack of bricks. Now, I didn't realize it was on my shoulders at the time, but once I loosed those straps over my shoulders and it hit the ground, I felt free. And I know a lot of Christians are like, well, free to sin, free to do what you want. No, I mean, it wasn't like that in my experience. Maybe some that's that way, but in my experience, I saw the world anew and beautiful. I was born again, to coin the phrase, and that's kind of what gives me the ambition to try to talk about atheism with Christians now. And I recognize you're also in the same ballpark and evangelical, and that's something we have in common. That's a good starting ground probably for our conversation. Is we're not really all that different. We just have some different ideas. I'd like to hear about yours today. Could you give us a little background on yourself, who you are, how people can find you?
I'm on Facebook, Thomas Peeler, Peeler, in Houston, Texas. I used to have a blog that I wrote about a while ago. I wrote a lot about evolution, intelligent design, and some philosophy, stuff like that. Yeah, my email is tgpeeler@usa.net. If anybody wanted to reach out and talk about anything, I'm happy to do that.
So you said you did a little bit on evolution. Just let me throw some rapid fire questions at you. I'm not going to do any pushback on this stuff because it's not really the topic of the discussion. But just so the listener can get an idea who Thomas Peeler is, do you believe in evolution for starters?
Not the neo-Darwinian version. No, I believe that things change over time. Certainly, of course, I believe that there's change within species, but I don't believe the evolutionary story is it's the neo-Darwinian story is the explanation for anything really, not much less all of life.
How about climate change? You think that humans are contributing to the Earth getting warmer?
It beats me. I think the models are probably flawed. I think they're the climate change models probably run into the same problem that the economic models do, and that the phenomenon is too complex to model. So, garbage in, garbage out. Unless your model is accurate, then, your conclusions are going to be inaccurate. When I got a master's degree back, I started my master's program back in 1977, which is it's not that long ago. Golly.
That was before I was itch in my dad's pants, though.
Yeah, I know. That's amazing. I was a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and I was having my first staff assignment after about 2 weeks of not having to have 40 Marines, that I was responsible for that were, getting into all kinds of trouble, 24/7. I just had to go to work and do my job and then go home. I got kind of bored, and so I started the master's program. And the first class I took, it had part of the stuff was Club of Rome.
What was your rank?
I was a first lieutenant at the time.
Okay.
I was a lieutenant colonel when I retired.
Oh.
And
so you weren't a working man anymore. You were bossing folks around by then. You were brass. That's brass, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, in the Marine Corps, a battalion commander lives just like his privates and PFCs. I mean, so, if they're walking, I'm walking. If they're carrying a pack, I'm carrying a pack.
Okay. It's a little different than maybe the other branches then.
If they're eating MREs, I'm eating MREs. They're drinking warm water, I'm drinking warm water. So
are Marines better than the other branches of the military?
Yeah. Well, that's our story, and we're sticking to it. Let me just say that.
I mean, if a Marine was going up against an Army guy or a Navy guy, or Coast Guard or what have you, he'd win, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, it just depends. There are a lot of, very awesome warriors in all the branches of the services. So that's more just fun.
I interrupted your college experience story, so
the big problem back in, and you could Google this, Google Club of Rome. I mean, everybody was concerned about climate cooling. The climate's cooling. Oh no, the climate's cooling. Climate's cooling. Well, it gets warmer, it gets cooler. It changes. Duh. But whether or not you can say for sure, that humans are doing it, or that, I read something the other day. Well, actually, it might have been today, about some kind of seaweed that keeps cows from farting methane. And cows produce more methane than 10 times more than humans or something. Yeah. I mean, I know people try to make money off of it. They try to make political hay off the issue, probably on both sides, but I wouldn't fight it with anybody about it.
How about as a military guy, what's your stance on the military-industrial complex? Going over there, we're in Libya, we're in Syria, we're in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan. I mean, what's your stance on that? Should we be promoting peace, or should we be kicking ass?
I think it's awful. Okay. I think it's awful. I'm politically probably. I call myself a libertarian without the tinfoil hat,
Sure, okay. Are you an Ayn Rand fan?
Well, I've read her, of course. I wouldn't say a fan, because I think she makes some really fundamental errors, but
You don't support her because she was an atheist. That's what it is, Tom.
Well, no, that's not. I think she was a very smart lady, and I think that she has a lot of things right, but I think that, in the end, she also gets some big things wrong, so.
Yeah. How about like abortion? Where do you stand on that? You want women to have the choice? You want babies to
I'm a pro-life guy.
Pro-life, okay.
Yeah, I don't see that, how passing through a 6-inch birth canal or whatever it is just magically changes you from a non-human into a real, I just.
How about like a zygote? Like I promised I wouldn't do pushback, but I just want to try to figure it out. Like whenever it's a small collection of cells, or it's a gamete, or something like that, like it's first trimester.
Yeah.
That's would you still be opposed to it then?
First time? Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What do you think of Trump? That's a big one.
Yeah.
You want to make America great again, or what?
That's a big one. Well, I voted for Trump, but only because I thought the alternative was even worse. And so.
Why didn't you go Gary Johnson as a libertarian sympathizer?
That guy didn't even. I would like for the libertarians to run a serious candidate.
Yeah.
If they ran a serious candidate, then I'd be all over
somebody that knows what Aleppo is. Right?
Exactly.
He was a nice guy, though. I liked his energy.
Did you see that meme that came out afterwards where Gary Johnson says, "What? You mean Poontang isn't the capital of Vietnam?"
That does sound like it could be a Vietnamese city, though.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you're the world traveler, not me, but that sounds like it to me on this end.
Yeah.
The main topic of our discussion, and I appreciate you doing the rapid fire. That's always kind of rude because there's no real way to explain difficult political and philosophical and scientific concepts in just a short amount of time. So I'm sure that didn't necessarily characterize your viewpoints appropriately.
No.
But
if I had to give one word for myself, it'd be rational. Okay, so.
All right. Well, you're in good company. My listeners would probably call themselves the same thing, and I do have some Christian listeners. I got some Muslim listeners. I got some. I've been developing some conspiracy theorist folks as well, and I got a lot of heart for those guys. Like I come from Christianity, so when I talk to a Christian guy, I'm like, dude, I feel like I get you, But I like doubting things. I like not trusting the government. I'm sure you can agree with that one. And, when these conspiracy guys come out of the woodwork, I'm like, hey, welcome. Welcome to the show. But, we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but some of that stuff, speaking of Vietnam, like Gulf of Tonkin stuff, and there's some wacky stuff going on out there.
Well, of course there is. The only reason I would never ascribe, some sort of complicated conspiracy theories to the government is that they're generally incompetent.
Yes.
I mean,
That's always my argument. Like, they couldn't
I
keep
think-
a dress with semen on it a secret. You really think that they could pull off 9/11?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, really, I mean, you know.
It sounds like we don't disagree about a lot, but one thing I know we do disagree about, and I want to get down to brass tacks.
Sure.
Do you believe there's a God out there or everywhere? And he's the guy that made everything. He's the reason that I'm good. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing you believe that there's a moral claim for God. And I've heard you on Dogma Debate talking about this topic with David Smalley. I heard you talking with Thomas Levi.
Sure.
Tiwa Tom, great show. Check him out on YouTube. You can just type in Thomas Levi, good friend. And I thought you did a great job on both shows.
Thank you. I like you say, I didn't know.
So why do you think there's a God?
I think there's a God because there's just too much evidence to the contrary I have to.
You have?
Yeah, pretty much.
That sounds weird to me.
I think it's really compelling. The evidence is compelling. Let me say that.
Like if I said to you, if you said, Robert, why don't you believe in God? And I said, I have. Aside from us getting down the rabbit trail of a free will debate or something like that, but that was a linguistic, Okay, I jumped ahead.
I'm just saying that instead of saying I have to, it'd be more accurate to say because I find the evidence so compelling.
Okay. Give me some evidence. The listener, even though we got a lot of different listeners, primarily they are atheists. So
sure.
Evidence for God to an atheist. I mean, when you say something like that, our mouths start like we love to hear that word. If it's biblical, you're more than welcome to present it. That might not be as compelling to someone that doesn't trust the Bible.
Oh yeah, that's a circular argument. I mean,
okay, fair enough.
I mean, I would never say that God exists because the Bible says so, and the Bible's God's word. So I mean, that's just that doesn't get you anywhere.
Okay, well, hit me, man. Let's do this thing.
If you heard the other shows, then you know that I've also wondered about how people of goodwill can disagree so radically about.
It is weird, yeah.
I mean, I want to know the truth. You want to know the truth. I think people should be treated with dignity and respect. You think the same thing. Blah 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 blah. So how is it about some issue like the existence of a creator? We're on opposite poles, and I think in my own mind, and I've been studying on this and reading on this and writing on this and thinking on this for since the spring of 2002, and I've been taking graduate courses in philosophy at the University of St. Thomas here in Houston. They've got a Center for Thomistic Studies, and so I've been taking, philosophy courses since 2013, graduate courses, and it's one of the most fun things I've ever done. And
really,
so,
you had fun with it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I enjoyed my Bible classes. By no means, I didn't even earn a bachelor's in Bible, so I didn't even get to the master level that you did. But I did enjoy my Bible classes. I just felt like I had a lot of questions that it didn't seem like that university appreciated me asking.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And that's because, and I think the Christian church, who am I to say, right? I mean, I don't know, but it seems to me, let me just say that, I'll sort of weasel that way. It seems to me that Christianity is probably in a pretty bad state. I mean, in America, you've got the televangelist, you've got this guy that the Lord told him to get another jet.
Oh well, you're a Houston dude.
Yeah.
So you had what was that preacher that he didn't want to let people in his churches during that recent hurricane?
Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
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 I think there's more to the story than that, and I think that they eventually did, and so I don't want to ping
You're
on
a
Joel.
local. You probably know more about it than I do, but I remember that was the news in the or that was the story in the news was that he didn't want to let him in at first, and then they released some fake photos of we don't have any room for him, and then coming to find out that was from a previous flood that had happened.
Yeah,
and then he finally lets him in and does like, oh, here I am on TV again. I'm letting everybody stay here now, and it did seem hypocritical, but
oh sure, I mean I'm not gonna personally because I don't know, but yeah, certainly the appearance is less than savory. and Christians get mixed up in politics, and Christians doing everything sort of but being a Christian.
I had Brian Fisher on recently, and I asked him about immigration, and I really, I expected this one, because we were going back and forth about how can a Christian support Trump, and you were saying, Christians get into politics, and I thought I was going to hit him with this one, because I said, do you think Jesus Christ would make a good border agent? And he responded, I did not expect this. He's like, yeah, I think he would. And I was like, wow, okay. I agree with you, man. I think that mixing Christianity and politics can get a little murky.
That's an interesting question.
Could you see Jesus up there with the AR-15? Just
no,
I don't know.
No.
Anyway, we totally got sidetracked. I'm sorry. So you were going to give me an evidence for God. Your best one, Mr. Peeler. Best evidence for God.
It's just from the very fact that things exist. That they're, the great philosophical question of, why is there something rather than nothing? If you stop and really, really think about it, things exist. If I look around, I know some things for certain. So we can all start in common ground. We can all agree that there are things.
Yes.
And we can all agree that that I'm aware, and you're aware. So there's two kinds of existence. There's a mental existence, and there's a real, if you will, an external, an internal and an external reality.
You are a philosopher at heart. I can tell immediately because you have snuck in duality very carefully.
Oh, no, for sure.
But, you said we all agree that something exists, and then you said, there's the mental and there's the physical. And it's almost like you're constructing a proper classical syllogism in the way that you're saying there are things, but there are two forms of thing. I shouldn't have interrupted. I should have let you keep going, but I have a very hard time, even as the host of a podcast, of keeping my mouth shut. I should listen more. But you said there are things, there are two forms of things, the mental, the physical. This duality that you're presenting, it seems like you're starting to give yourself the ability to create a soul. Am I jumping ahead? Am I making an error there?
Well, let's talk about it. So we know that there's an out there. We know that there's an external world. There's a world aside from me. When I close my eyes, it doesn't go away, right?
Right.
When I'm unconscious and they're, replacing my knee for the second time or whatever.
Sure.
The world doesn't go away, so it's independent of my mind. There's an objective reality out there. And also there's a reality inside my head. I'm aware of these other things that are external to me. So there's two different kinds of existence.
I don't know that that's two different. That's two different kinds of your perception from your conscious. Your consciousness can stop and start again.
Right.
And the way that we do, and I've heard you talk about law of identity before, so I know we're in comfortable territory with where I'm going here. 'Cause you do know your stuff, I'll give you that. But the way that we use the law of identity, the way that we identify ourselves, we claim that there is a self. I don't think there's a good philosophical argument for that, but that's not really our topic today. But
we can go that way right off the bat if you want to go that way, or maybe I could turn it around and ask you, because what we're talking about.
That would be the way to go for you to turn that.
What we have to.
That would be the most advantageous stance, I think. But
I'm not trying to.
It's going to be hard to prove a soul. That's my only.
I don't think so at all. But
okay, prove a soul.
Well, let's just say. I think you have to back into some things. I call it doing the math. All right. If x plus 3 equals 10, then x equals 7, right?
Okay.
So you back into some things.
Hold on, let me get my calculator. Correct. Yeah. Yes. All right.
Yeah. I picked something easy on purpose.
Some stuff is just the way it is.
Typically, I find, and feel free to correct me if you've got a different opinion, but typically, I think of atheism as not an assumption, but a conclusion. In other words, you just don't say, like I don't say, there is a God. When I say there's a God, that's a conclusion to an argument that I've made.
So you'd say we're kind of on equal footing. I'm claiming there isn't one. You're claiming there is one. We both need to make our own points. Is that kind of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If it could be true, it could be false.
This isn't really like a debate challenge question per se. It's more like a question just to kind of fill you out here. How do you feel about if I were to say I take a null set hypothesis, and I know that you're familiar with that, but in case any listener isn't, it's kind of saying that you do not believe in something until you have a reason to believe it. Kind of, if you say, just to reference our earlier conversation, Bush did 9/11, I say, well, I'm going to start from a place of not believing it. I will only believe it based on evidence. If I start from a place of believing Bush did 9/11, then that would be a really irrational stance to take, just on a fundamental level. And I kind of feel like whenever we're, like, I see what you're saying, like, okay, I believe, atheists don't believe, you got believers, non-believers, they're on equal footing, but I feel like that kind of sets us up. You know how the way the news media will get like a wacky, crazy dude on the left side of the TV, you know, while you got the scrolling marquee underneath them, you know, crazy thing happened in Detroit, police shootings, and all this stuff, but on the left side is the crazy guy, scrolling marquee underneath them, you know, warning, warning, and then on the right side they've got an actual like scientist or an actual professor, an actual guy that, you know, has a master's degree in something like yourself. It's almost like they're putting them on equal footing, but one of them's a professional, and the other guy is just some dude they grabbed, you know, from a dumpster behind Chick-fil-A that has an opinion.
Right.
And I feel like whenever we start to compare, given the null set hypothesis, whenever we start to compare, I believe and you don't believe, and they're on equal footing, well, I don't know that that's fair, because I don't think that they should be equal. I think we should both start from a place of not believing.
Well, no, I agree, but I completely agree with that, Rob.
Okay.
But the point, the thing that I'm, everybody has what I call fundamental intellectual commitments. Okay. In other words, we all have to start somewhere. Everybody's got to start somewhere. You have to start your argument somewhere, whether you're an atheist or whether you're a believer. You know. Would
you say starting from a place of ignorance is the best place to go? Just start with I don't know. Is that fair?
Well, no, I wouldn't. But for this reason, let me see if this makes sense to you. Let's say, you know, you've got a bank account and you get your bank statement at the end of the month, and hey, there's $1,000 more in your bank account at the end of the month than there was at the beginning of the month. So my question to you then is, do you know, knowing that you've done all the math right, all the checks and the in and out are all correct, it's all good data, it's all, the math is done properly, and you have $1,000 more than you did at the beginning of the month.
I look at my bank statement, I got $1,000 more than I anticipated. That's basically it.
Not that you anticipate. Well, that could be.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand it.
My point is that you can't know what your ending balance is unless you know what your beginning balance is. Okay? I mean, if your beginning balance was 2,000, then your ending balance is 3,000. If your beginning balance
we would both admit then that I don't know.
The
only way that I could know is by your analogy, which I think is very appropriate to defend my point, is that you have to have the evidence of the starting point. If at least you have.
Exactly.
All right.
You have to start with certainty.
No.
And
if you don't have that beginning balance, then you don't know.
Yeah, the beginning balance in my argument is that things exist. Okay? Things exist.
That sounds like a presupposition.
I'm not saying, of course not. It's axiomatic. It's self-evident. It's not, I mean, things exist. I'm not saying what kinds of things exist at this point. I'm not saying only material things or only immaterial things or a combination. I'm just saying there's stuff.
So analogously speaking, things exist. Is that the increase in your bank account or is that the starting point?
That's the starting point.
All right. Then we already have that. Yeah, we would agree. Yeah. That's no problem. I make the same, I don't like the word presupposition. I shouldn't have said. I make the same assumption that you do based on my conscious experience of reality. We both come to the same conclusion. Things exist.
Yeah.
we're starting at a low bar.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry. I pushed back, so it's fair. You're right.
You have to. I mean, because if you want to start.
Yeah, you're starting from the beginning. Okay.
But here's the thing. In logic, if you start an error, you end an error. If you start an uncertainty, you end an uncertainty.
Things exist.
And that's certain. I mean, we know, like I said, everybody has to agree with that. Now, if I said only material things exist or only nature exists, then which is the position of many, if not most, of the atheists that I know. So the argument goes like this: only material things exist, God's not material, souls aren't material, moral law is not material, design is not material, purpose is not material, et cetera, so they don't exist. Well, see, that's a valid argument.
If I told you that that's not necessarily my viewpoint, could we accept that as a straw man and not necessarily go down that path? Not an intentional straw man. I'm not saying you were trying to straw man me, but just that that's not necessarily...
Yeah, sure.
Because there's a difference between philosophical naturalism and methodological, right? So the philosophical naturalism would say, and once again, I know I'm not educating you on this topic, but just in case anyone doesn't know, philosophical naturalism makes the claim that you do, and I think you're correct in error.
I would call it ontological naturalism.
Fair enough. Same difference. Sure. They assume that there is nothing but that which, is natural.
It's nature.
Yeah. And then the other one is saying, my previous argument, coming from the null set hypothesis, maybe there is a supernatural, but we'll believe in that whenever we see it. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to, in order to combat methodological naturalism, you have to come up with some kind of, maybe not scientific evidence. I mean, that would be nice, we like that. But even philosophical evidence for the supernatural, that's a tough one, man. Before we were talking about proving the soul. Now we're talking about proving the supernatural. I don't even know what that would look like, how do you do that? Maybe a miracle or something? I don't know.
Well, no. I mean, the way that, what works for me is the fact that things exist. All right. There are things. Okay. So I'm based upon, and
we're past that.
I think this is I think this is a very scientific sort of way to do it because it's based upon observation. It's based upon reality. I'm not just saying, oh, God exists and that's the way it is and, get over it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are things, and I'm saying that as I look around and I notice, I observe that never have I seen anything that doesn't exist be able to create or to cause anything else. For example, I can't write with a non-existent pen. I can't drink non-existent water. I can't eat non-existent food. I can't drive a non-existent car. If I wasn't here, I couldn't be talking to you. You see what I'm saying?
Hey, Tom, I think there might be a problem with that.
What's that?
I'm just fireballing off the top of my head right now. Like, this is not like I'm not opening up a Chris Hitch book on this one, okay? Like, I just thought of something.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, okay? You're saying things exist is the first premise of your syllogistic conclusion for God, right? And
well,
I'm not pushing back on that. I agree.
No,
no problem. But
there's two premises.
But I'm wondering, if things didn't exist, would then that falsify your argument?
Yeah.
And this is the flaw, I think, with this logic. And once again, tell me if I'm stepping, I'm taking a couple double steps here. I'm not following course, but didn't things not exist before creation? Yet the Bible says God did. God's eternal.
Well, no, exactly.
So if things didn't exist,
there never was a God.
Falsifying your argument,
there wouldn't be anything, including God.
Then you're saying that existence is eternal.
Yeah, that's the conclusion of the argument.
That's fine. We can agree on that. No problem, man. But I don't see what that has to do with God. If existence is eternal, then you don't have to get something from that. You get something from something all the time, constantly.
Well, yeah, you have to. The question is what is the nature?
Existence is eternal. You just disproved the whole God argument with that.
No, I did not. The question is what kind of existence? Okay, there's two kinds of existence.
What two kinds? You going back to soul stuff?
Well, there's an eternal existence, and there's an infinite existence, and there's a finite existence. What is your candidate for the eternally existing thing?
Hold on. Before we move on, I just want to. I feel like we answered that question just now about things exist. If things exist, that leads to there being a God. But things don't have to exist for there to be a God, therefore falsifying the claim. And you say, well, things did exist, God exists because God's eternal. And I say, yes, I'm okay with eternality. And you say,
that's not the argument.
Okay, did I mischaracterize it? Yes, I'm not trying to paint you in the wrong brush. It just understand that listeners aside, between you and me, you need to know that that's where I'm coming from right now. Like, I'm thinking your argument just got destroyed, right? Like, no. So help me out.
Let me start big and then we'll get granular. Okay. The argument goes like this. It's a, and you can look it up or your listeners can look it up. It's called modus tollens. It's the way of negation. And it's a valid form of argument. And valid just means in logic that your premises necessitate the conclusion. Okay.
Spell that for me. I wanted to say spell that for the listener, but to repeat myself, the risk of redundancy, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Modus what?
Really? Oh, well, modus tollens. It's M-O-D-U-S in Latin, the way of, and tollens, T-O-L-L-E-N-S, negation. So
if P then Q. Okay, I'm familiar with it. I didn't know the term. Fascinating.
If P then Q, not Q, therefore not P.
Cool.
So it's like, if this is true, then that's true, but that's not true, so this isn't true.
Mr. Peeler, you taught me something today about philosophy.
Oh, well, good. Or logic, maybe.
Okay.
It took me, I've had several graduate courses in logic, so, it's not easy all the time. But anyway, so this form of argument is valid, which means that the premises guarantee the conclusion. Now, it doesn't guarantee that the conclusion is true, okay, because the premises might be false. All it's saying is that the premises as they're stated guarantee the conclusion. For example, let me give you an example of a valid argument that's
not sound.
Not sound, exactly. All dogs are reptiles. Rover is a dog, therefore Rover is a reptile.
Right. It's
that's
valid but not sound.
Valid argument, but it's not sound because the major premise is wrong.
Cool.
All dogs aren't reptiles; they're mammals. Okay, but modus tollens is valid. In other words, if you do it right, then you get an answer that. And the next step is that past validity is soundness in deductive reasoning. And if the structure of your argument is valid, that's what validity is about. It's about the form or the structure of your argument. If your structure is valid, in other words, if it's good, and your premises are true, then you can be absolutely certain that your conclusion is true. Okay? So, my two premises are that things exist and that things have to exist before they can cause anything. Okay? So if there's nothing, if there's ever nothing, there would still be nothing. Okay?
Yeah, but we just both agreed that an eternal universe would solve the problem. We don't even need a God.
Oh, no, we didn't agree with it that the universe is eternal at all. And we're not there yet. I'm just talking about still at a very high level. If there was ever nothing, there'd still be nothing, but there is something. So there's always been something. That's the argument that I'm making. We know that there's always been something. Otherwise, there would be nothing. So the answer to the question, why is there something instead of nothing? Well, the answer is because there's always been something.
Okay.
If there was never nothing, there'd still be nothing. But there is something.
All right. So before God created everything, was there something?
Yeah, God.
All right. So if we were to say the universe always existed, would that fall within at least the first 2 points of your syllogism?
Well, if we said it was the universe that always existed, then we could go philosophical and scientific and say, that the best science today says that the universe did have a beginning. It's called Big Bang cosmology. And if you look at it philosophically, anything that changes, the fact that things change is a huge metaphysical clue, because it means that there's something there has to be a cause for that change.
I fear this might be a bit of semantics. If I'm using the term universe as meaning everything.
Okay.
And then you say, well, the universe had a beginning, and therefore everything had a beginning. Then we start to get lost in some minutia there. Let's incorporate the word cosmos.
Well, no, let's define our terms. Okay,
sure.
That's the first thing you always need to do is define our terms. The universe. The cosmos, the universe, the creation.
That's why I wanted to get specific, is if we're going to say the cosmos caused the universe. The cosmos isn't necessarily related to time and space. The cosmos would be a better term for everything. Whenever I said universe, I meant it in the sense of universal. And I appreciate where you said, well, the universe had a beginning with Big Bang, no problem. But we are using perhaps the same definition but different usages. You know what I mean? So the way that I was using it was to imply everything. The way that you're using it is to imply a temporary state of existence with, planets, stars, people, aliens, what have you.
Yeah, the way I'm using it would be, nature, the natural world, the universe, the physical world, the material world, everything that exists inside the
Right.
envelope or the boundaries of our
that
universe.
had to come from something also.
Outside.
Sure. Well,
Yeah,
not
right.
necessarily outside of it, but at least something as a causal agent. So in that sense, saying that the cosmos caused the universe, I don't think that's a play on words. I think that's just a recognition that there are different usages for trying to talk about.
Well, but I just to be clear, I'm not sure I'm following here, but I didn't say that the cosmos caused the universe. To me, cosmos and universe are
Synonymous.
synonym.
Yeah. So, okay,
Yeah.
let's say, before the Big Bang, what caused that? We immediately, I think you would recognize that we run into a problem. If the Big Bang causes space-time continuum, then how could you have something before that at all? Because there would be no time. So there is no way to have something before time. That doesn't make sense in itself. But if we looked at it in the sense of there is eternality. Time
and space and matter, we're all created at once. I mean, time is a finite thing too.
But you're not immune to the time paradox any more than I am. We both have to struggle with that one, because if there wasn't time before the Big Bang, then how could there be an action that caused it?
Well, time is a way to measure change. Okay, so if there's no change, and if God is eternal and He's pure, I hate to if He's pure potency and pure act and no potency. In other words, if He's an infinite being and who never changes because He doesn't have the potential to change, He's already everything He could ever be. He can't be any more than He is. He can't be any less than He is. Then He doesn't change, and so there is no time. But we can't talk about before there was time. That's a linguistic problem.
Yes.
It's not a paradox. It's just a linguistic thing.
Yes.
I mean, I can't talk. It's impossible for me to talk about before time without, using time, because that's how, because we're finite beings. That's how it works.
Right.
Ultimately, probably, I'm sure we won't do it today, but if you want to have further conversations, we can do this. Ultimately, to get into the Christianity, but ultimately, I think that's why that explains the humanity of Jesus Christ. Because for us to have a relationship with God, how is it that we could possibly, comprehend in any real sort of way an infinite being who never began, He always was. He's perfectly, He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He's all everything. He's everywhere. And not only is He everywhere, but all of Him is everywhere. I mean, think about that for a second, right? I mean, we can't get our heads around that. And so if God wanted to have a relationship with His creation, then we can't be Him. So He had to become us. And so Jesus, I mean, I think there's a logical necessity for Jesus in Christianity, because without that, it's just a head game, but we don't have it's not just a head game, because there's Jesus. He was a real man. He walked on the earth, lived on the earth, ate, drank, talked, spoke, healed people, did miracles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we could talk about, the evidences for and against that at some point too. But I can relate to Jesus. He's a man. He's a human being. I get that. And so I can talk to Him. If He was here, if He was in the room with me, I could talk to Him. I could shake His hand. I could give Him a hug. I could listen to Him. We could have dinner together. So we could have a real relationship. And that's the only way to have a relationship with God, is through Jesus, because we can't get God, because God's infinite and we're finite. I mean, that's just my opinion. There might be theologians who would be, screaming and, wanting to, crucify me for saying something like that. But I mean, that's just the way it seems like to me. Because
let me jump back, because I do appreciate talking about Jesus, but here's where we were. Okay. We said there is something.
Right.
We agreed that, at least philosophically, it doesn't seem logical that something could come from nothing. and ignoring the whole Krauss argument of, what is nothing? Nothing isn't really nothing. Nothing scientifically is different from nothing philosophically, what have you. Staying in philosophy. Then we agreed, therefore, that there must be some kind of eternality to existence.
Right.
And the way that you explain the eternality is to say that God's eternal. And therefore created. So A is eternal and created B.
We still. I mean, there's another step or two in here.
But hold on. I'm saying B being eternal. It seems like that would be following proper Occam's razor format in the sense that you're adding something extra. And I don't know that that's an appropriate logical course to take unless you can prove it. And you can't prove it with itself. That's reductio ad absurdum. That doesn't make sense. That's like, whenever we say, one rock is heavier than the other rock and we tie a string to them and then drop them both at the same time, does the heavier rock pull down the light one, or does the light one keep the heavier rock from falling at the same, velocity? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make it. Why do we need to take that extra step at all?
Well, it depends on if you want to have an explanation for things that change. Because the second thing that we know about the world is that things exist. And so because of the fact that things exist, we know that
you proving B, you're proving it with A, but then how do you prove A coming into existence? And if the argument is just like, well, A is eternal, then why wouldn't the argument be that B is eternal?
I thought I said just doing the math. I mean, you back into this because it's from what you know to what you don't know.
You're saying the reason that B exists, B being the universe or the cosmos or however we want it, existence itself, I don't know. Okay, but just what we perceive, all right? I don't see God. I can look in my telescope and see the moon. I can see the universe, what have you. All right, so you're saying the reason that B is here is because of A. And I say, all right, so if something comes from nothing, then therefore, where does A come from? And you're going to say, well, that's eternal. And I say, well, then why couldn't you have just used that same claim for B? And then you go Big Bang, and I go, yeah, but now we're talking about what cause and effect occurred before time, and you go, well, that's a linguistic problem, and it seems like, well, okay, so then we couldn't make that argument. So Occam's razor, we need to just stick with B, therefore must be eternal until we get further evidence. And if you're going to provide evidence for God, it can't be the existence of B, because B could just as reasonably be eternal.
And it can't be eternal. B cannot be eternal because the characteristics of what's eternal, everything in this universe is caused.
How can God be eternal then?
Everything in this universe changes.
How is A eternal?
That's the whole point, Robert. I mean, that's the conclusion of the argument. If that's the getting to what we know, what we didn't know, but now we know from what we know for sure. I know for sure that if there was ever nothing, there'd still be nothing. But there is something. Okay? So there was never nothing, and that's just a different way of saying.
But we already know B is something. We haven't even proven A is something. We're just using A to try to explain the complexities of B's existence. But we know B is something.
No, exactly.
We agreed with that. But you're adding this A thing, and you haven't proved it.
Listen to me. Listen. Here's the premises, all right? If P is Q, then if P is true, then Q is true. If there was ever nothing, then there would still be nothing. All right?
Okay.
If P is in Q. If this, then
But you're
that.
saying there was never nothing.
No. I'm saying if there was ever nothing, there would still be nothing.
Okay. Let's follow that thought experiment forward and say, then there must have been something.
No. Okay. There's another step, though. If there was if ever nothing, then still nothing, but things exist. I mean, that's the very first thing we both agreed to.
So there could not have been a state of nothing. Nothing can't exist, which makes sense even linguistically.
Yeah, so
only something exists. Nothing doesn't exist. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So why do we need God?
So there's an eternal being. All right. Now.
Well, hold on. There's an eternal existence. There is eternality.
Are you talking about the difference? I mean, when I say being and existence, I mean, that's the same thing, right?
I'm okay with that as long as later you don't try to make being like an intellectual agent.
Well, I'm not going to try to do that. I would only do that by, inductively, looking at evidence and working backwards. looking at the effect and reasoning back to the cause, which is kind of how scientists do it, I think. They look at the data and then they look at how to explain the data.
Fair enough. If we were to attempt to move forward, because I feel like we're kind of in the mud right now, but I don't think we necessarily disagree. I think we're arguing terms, and I would hate for the conversation to fall apart right there. If we were at least to agree something must come from something, and therefore there must be an eternality in this equation, could we then move forward? Even though you might be saying, well, it's A that's eternal, and then I might be saying, well, it's B that's eternal. But either way, we could at least move forward to your third point. And then I don't know that we have to necessarily die on this hill.
There's an eternal being. And what does eternal mean? Eternal means that it always was. Okay? Eternal means to be always existed.
Always was and always will be. Sure.
And if something always was, then it's not caused. It's uncaused. Okay. And so if something is eternal, then it's uncaused. It's also necessarily exists.
Or repeatedly caused.
It must be its nature to
exist. You could
say
a repeating cause, because if we're going to accept eternality, we have to also admit the infinite. We recognize mathematically, to use your previous analogy, that pi exists. There is such thing as infinite. So an infinite causation isn't logically impossible.
Are you talking about an infinite regress of causes being possible?
Yes, philosophically.
Yeah. Well, see, philosophically, that won't work either because of this. Let's say that. Let me couch the argument, okay, in terms of, so we sort of shifted over from existence now. We've agreed that there's always been something, whatever the nature of that something is, okay? And it's uncaused because it always was, so it didn't need to be caused, all right? And so let's say that we want to have a series of causes. The series of causes has to start somewhere, right? I mean, it's got to start. You can't have the second, third, and fourth cause unless you have the first cause.
I don't know that either of us are immune to that problem as well. Just like we both would struggle with how did time begin kind of thing. How do you make something like time begin? At what time did it start? That sort of thing. That we both struggle with that. In the same sense, I think that we both struggle with the infinite regress problem. In the same way that reality or existence came from God, and I say, well, then what did God come from? And you say, well, God's always been. I say, well, where did that law itself come from? And you say, well, that's also explained by God. God said he's always been. That's also a constant regress.
I didn't say that. I said that necessarily we have an eternal being. That's what I've said. That's the conclusion of my argument. That there's an eternal being. Now, what we have to do now,
and I have no pushback against that, except for the answer that it either has always been or that it is always in a continual state of being, and therefore in a constant state of causing.
That's what eternal means. I mean, if something always was, then it never started.
So a tree causes a seed, which causes a tree, which causes a seed. And you say, well, where did you get the seed? And I said, well, from the tree. And you say, where did you get the tree? And I said, well, from the seed. You can argue that's an infinite regress, but that's just a continual causing.
That's just a circular argument. That's all that is. I mean, you haven't explained the origin of anything there. You just explained that, trees come from oak trees.
But if something's eternal, it couldn't have an origin.
Exactly.
It would. You asking me for the origin of everything would be just as absurd as me asking you for the origin of God. By everything, we mean everything from the past to the future in an eternality of causation. In the same way, if I said, what is the origin of God? You said, well, God by definition is eternal. So I once again, I think we're right back to ground one. Even after we go to your third syllogism, we're right back to the beginning of saying, why do we have to add God? Things could just be eternal.
Well, because you have to look around and you have to analyze. You have to look at the evidence. Are you eternal?
No, each part of that which is eternal could be temporary, but only by law of identification. If I say my identity is related to my human form, then whenever I'm born, I begin, and whenever I die, I end. And the flora and the fauna then feast off of me, and they continue until they die, and then they get feasted on. By law of identity, things begin and end, but that doesn't mean that... let me throw it out this way, okay? Would you admit that we are the universe? Because we are part of the universe. So whenever you look at Mars, or you look at Jupiter, or you look at the sun, you're pointing at the universe. It's just that we identify these things separately, but that doesn't mean that they're not part of the universe, right?
Of course they're part of the universe.
Right. So we're also part of the universe.
Correct.
Therefore, by the same definition, we are the universe. This is all universe, right? The only difference is we are the universe experiencing itself.
What does that even mean?
We have conscious. And I think where a lot of your...
I would agree with that.
Your reason for trying to think of the cause...
That's awareness.
Let me throw this out there, and you tell me if I'm reading you wrong. I feel like a lot of the reason for you trying to find a cause for the universe to also be conscious is because we are conscious. So you think of this must have come from intelligence because I know that I, Tom Peeler, am intelligent. And it almost feels, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm mischaracterizing you, but it almost feels like you and I are like cavemen, right? We're real hairy dudes. We're sitting in a cave doing push-ups together. You would win because you're a Marine. But still, we hear lightning outside that cave, and you say something caused that sound, right? And it must have been intelligent. It must have been conscious. It has its own agency.
No, I don't say that. I don't say that.
But that seems like how you're looking at all of reality itself. It's almost like you're saying, I'm the universe experiencing itself, so therefore whatever caused the universe must also be experiencing things. It must also be intelligent. It's almost like you hear a sound outside the cave and you go, there's some kind of agency out there that caused that sound. And I'm going, dude, that was just some lightning. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So what caused the lightning? I mean, it makes no sense.
Before Christianity came along, they used to say God, and there's lots of parts throughout religious texts that say that storms are caused by God. I would say that it's kind of a dangerous route to go.
Let's get scientific for a second instead of philosophical. Maybe this is just all too abstract. I would like, homework. Google properties of matter, okay? Because a human body.
You mean like the 3 states of matter?
Well, 3 states of matter, properties of matter. What can matter do? Matter has mass. There's an atomic number. It has different properties. It conducts electricity. It doesn't conduct electricity. It's malleable. It isn't malleable. It's tensile, not et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I'm not a material scientist, but I know that matter can do certain things.
All right, pulling it up here, properties of matter, density, color. What can be measured? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of where you're going with that? How we can measure matter itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this goes to back to the question at the beginning about if we're just 100% physical beings, or if there's a soul to us, if there's an immaterial part, if there's a duality to the universe, Okay, so I'm telling you, Rob, that one of the things that you'll never ever find as a property of matter is that it can create itself. Okay.
Well, it can create. Sometimes it can create something else.
I didn't say that. I didn't disagree with that. I said it can't create itself.
But yeah, I mean that would be defying the laws of logic, right?
Exactly. Okay.
But if it was eternal, then it wouldn't have to create it. It would be in a constant state of replication.
No, it would be in a constant state of stasis. An eternal being is in a constant
its eternality would be a constant state of stasis, but a tree that makes a seed and the seed becomes a tree, we wouldn't say that's necessarily a constant state of stasis. We just say it's constantly replicating itself. It's constantly causing its own existence. Trees exist.
No, that's just Aristotelian change. That's substance and form, that's generation and corruption in Aristotelian terms. Matter changes shape, it changes form all the time.
Right.
But it's not creating anything new out of nothing. Okay. And
but we both agree that can't happen.
Exactly.
So how did God do it?
But there is matter. So somebody did it. right?
But it's an impossibility.
It is not impossible because we're here.
So you're saying God can make something from nothing?
Exactly.
But I thought you said something can't come from.
It's not coming from nothing. It's coming from God.
So then, in that same sense, if we are all a part of the universe, then I guess we would all be a part of God.
Well, I mean, that's probably a little, I don't know.
Go haywire.
Weird for me, but,
Perhaps the conversation for next time, at least.
We're creatures, certainly. I mean, in my view, God created us, and, but to go down the matter road, I mean, you guys, think about this for a while.
I'll give you the last point on it.
So matter can't create itself. Matter can't reason. Matter can't, intend to do anything. Matter's not purposeful. Matter's not right or wrong. Matter's not any of those things. Yet all of those things exist. Matter's not conscious of itself. Matter's not aware. If I croak tomorrow and I get cremated, I'm going to be like, 2 or 3 pounds of dirt. I mean, if that's all there is, then you should be able to reanimate me. But that dirt, those are just chemicals. They're never going to be aware. They're never going to be conscious. They're never going to be able to use language. They're never going to be able to do anything on purpose. So, but we do all those things. And so that's what leads me to believe that there's another aspect to reality besides just the material world. That there's an immaterial world that's going on. Like, for example, it's like watching a baseball game and a football game. If you're watching a football game, you know that it's different from the baseball game because there's different rules, right? Football team has 9 players on a side, 11. Baseball team has 9 on a side. Football game has 4 quarters. Baseball game has 9 innings, et cetera, et cetera. Football game has first downs. Baseball game has outs. So if I told you that the football game and the baseball game, that you were watching the same game, you'd go, well, no, I'm not. And if I said, how do you know you're not? You'd say, well, because they have different rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah. So, bear with me here for a second. So my brain chemistry is all physics and chemistry, right? It's electricity and it's neurotransmitters and it's synapses and axons and, it's all that. It's all brain chemistry. It's the laws of physics. It's material. Okay. But my thinking is not governed by chemistry. My thinking is governed by logic. So there's 2 different things going on. There's the physical part that's governed by brain chemistry, and then there's the immaterial part, my thinking, that's governed by logic. And I would argue later on.
Not necessarily.
Well, I mean,
you could be illogical. I mean, logic exists just like numbers exist, whether we accept them or not.
People certainly can be illogical. Okay.
People can be completely unaware of numbers.
I will grant you that. But I'm just illustrating the point to say that there's 2 different things going on. You cannot explain language, the existence of language, by merely referring to the laws of physics and the periodic table of elements, because language involves representation. Language involves a representation, symbols, and it's 2 things for a language. You got to have symbols and you got to have rules. Okay. And in English, our symbols are the alphabet, A, B, C, Z. And the rules are you arrange them in certain ways, they form words. And those words represent other things. Okay. And those are all arbitrary conventions. Those don't reduce to the periodic table of elements or the laws of physics. You can't get there from here. You can't get from language to the periodic table of elements. Because there's intentionality in language. There's purpose in language. There are symbols in language. There's reasoning in language. And so all I'm saying is that realm operates under different rules.
But this is cyclical. I mean, you can't get the periodic table of elements without symbols and language also. The elements certainly exist.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
You're not going to get a table of them, that's for sure.
Well, yeah. So there's something else going on besides the material world. That's the only point that I would like to make.
That was the point you started with, and we came full circle. And I said I wouldn't push back on it, and I did it anyway, and I made a liar out of myself. Okay. But I really appreciate getting to pick your brain about this. And
well, thank you. And then if you want to do,
we got to do this some more. This was fun. I got frustrated at some points in there, I'll be honest with you, but okay. You're a very interesting guy to talk to.
Thank you.
I've listened to you talk to a lot of people before, and I enjoyed that, and getting the chance to be front and center of this was was really fun, and I'd love to do it again. Tell everybody how they can find you, and if they have any questions for you.
Yeah, tgpeeler, Tango Golf Peeler, Peeler, like a banana peeler, Tango Golf Peeler at USA.net. And I'll be happy to, if somebody emails, I promise to email back. I don't promise to have an answer, or but I will communicate it, and I welcome that. I delight in that. I mean, I think the universe and life is really, really, really incredibly amazing, and I love to talk about this stuff.
Enjoyed talking to Tom today, and thank you for listening to us talk about nothing.
Talk about things that nobody cares.
Thanks to Jason Cavo and David Blair. Thank you to all our patrons. You can help support this message at patreon.com/right. Remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week is all about the psychological impact of indoctrination. It's a tragic story. We'll be talking to Brent Lee about growing up in fundamentalism. He was a homeschooled kid, played a major role in the church, and then one day they all turned on him. His life fell apart. He got hooked on prescription drugs. But then something really special happened. He let go of God and welcomed someone else into his heart. It's a love story. It's a message of hope. I think we could all use a little more of that, but you'll have to wait till next week to get those details. Between now and then, keep asking questions. Keep being skeptical about what you see in the news. Keep requiring your leadership to justify their authority. Resist making heroes out of flawed people. Question everything. Spend time with those you love, and don't forget to breathe. And remember that you have the right to reason. You can tell us, it means as much to me as it does to you, though. At least you can read that we're both legit on it, about how much we care about this kind of stuff. And I think these conversations are conversations we should have, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because I have seen far too many Christians that have, gotten that kind of treatment that you got, sit down and shut up and, believe it. And that's just so wrong. That is so wrong. That is so wrong, so wrong, so wrong. And I mean, there are people, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I mean, there are Christians who think that, that reason is the enemy of faith.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
The Bible said it. I believe it. That settles it.
Yes. That's what I grew up with. Very fundamentalist.
I apologize.
Very, very legalistic.
And you know what I say to those people? I say, hey, look, if I came up to you and said, the Quran said it.
Yeah,
and
I was just about to say that. Yeah, exactly.
And that settles it. Would that work for you?
Well, that's what I always throw. Mostly at family members or former church members. Or that, so as I say, yeah, but what if I said exactly what you said? What if I said the same thing about the Quran and they say, oh, well, I mean, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. And I'm like, that sounds like religious war, buddy. That sounds like some Dark Ages stuff.
I know. That's just so wrong. I think I could show you where, I mean, we didn't talk about this at all, but the laws of logic, I think they come from observation too. That there are things, and as I look around and I observe
the laws
that everything
of logic come from observation.
Yeah, everything is what it is. I mean, I see that. Yeah, think about that. Noodle that around for a while.
I'll think it over. To me, logic is like numbers. So it seems like those things would exist whether we were here or not, or whether there was a conscious mind or not, including a God.
But my awareness. So in other words, the rules of logic are discovered. They're not created. I mean, I didn't.
Okay.
We don't invent them. We discover them.
So would you say logic existed before God?
I would say that God is logic.
Oh, you're one of those.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't mean that condescendingly, but you're
that's
okay.
all right.
Logic and
That's-
God are.
Oh, yeah. He's rational. He's rational. God can't make a square circle.
Okay. Next time, let's do that. It's the same argument for goodness, right? Am I close?
Exactly.
Like goodness
Yeah,
is God, God is good, that kind of thing. So
Right.
therefore, whenever
Right.
you do good, you're actually like reciprocating God's nature in a way, or something like that. It's kind of a weird.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay, but it's close to your logic claim, though, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, because and that's that's an amazing thing. I remember when I was
It would make sense in the sense of whenever the whole good, God is good, and you're reciprocating God good, would make sense where he says, whenever you do unto someone, the least among, thank you, yeah, the least among you,
Right.
that you're doing that unto me. That would kind of make sense if we were thinking that goodness is God. I don't know, it gets wacky.
Yeah.
Skydive naked from a narrow plane. Over lady with a body full of metal space. My heart.
Thanks for having me on, and I think you're a very generous and gracious host, and I look forward to maybe doing this again, Rob.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yeah.
That was fun. I had fun with it. I really think I got you, man. 'Cause the whole thing of, I shouldn't start it up again. I'm sorry.
He had the right to reason.